Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and today we have another return visitor. I'm very excited because attorney Beth McCormack is joining us again. Thank you for coming, Beth.
Thanks for having me, Susan. I'm so excited to be back.
Well, I'm thrilled that you're back, and this episode kind of grew out of your first appearance, which, by the way, everyone, was lessons from a billion-dollar divorce attorney, and that is because Beth is one of the leading divorce attorneys in the country. She has handled and is handling billion-dollar divorces, all the way from those ultra high net worth down to the regular people like us. But she also, you mentioned, Beth, at the end of that episode, that as much as you like representing and working with clients as they work through their divorce issues and helping them, it's your work working with kids that really is what feeds you, what really is you're passionate about. And I've had a lot of clients and listeners reaching out lately on the issues of guardian ad litems and attorneys for the minor children and issues around that. And so I'm like, who better to come and help demystify those roles for my listeners. So thank you again for coming. And I'm really excited. We're going to dive into this. I think that you have insights that are going to be so valuable for people.
My pleasure. I'm excited to go through it with all of you.
Well, and let's just start with what they are, because I think, you and I talked just before we started taping. Guardian ad litem, attorney for the children, attorney for the minor children. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different names for all these roles. Guardian. What are they, and what's the difference between their roles?
All right. So I'm in Illinois. My practice is based in Chicagoland. So I'll speak from that perspective first and then break it down and how it might apply to all other jurisdictions, states, et cetera, countries.
Yeah.
So in Illinois, we have always had guardians ad litem, which is a role where you're looking to protect the best interests of the children. There is another role where you are appointed as the attorney for the children. Interestingly, that's where you're an advocate for that child, and it may or may not always be in their best interest as far as the role that you take as their advocate, right? Think of the 16-year-old girl who wants what she wants because she wants it. As her attorney, I have to advocate for her. So it's not a role that's used very often for that reason. And Illinois created several years ago a blended role called child representative, where you look at the child's best interest and what they want, and you try to look at that together and act on their behalf, recognizing that this is an appointment, I think, all around the world, Susan, you are appointed by a judge. It's not something very commonly, I think consumers think that these roles are somebody that they hire. Like,
right.
How can somebody represent my kids and I don't even know who they are or have a say-so in it? Well, that's the way it is, right, Susan? I think all over.
Yeah, I mean, everywhere, but the two states I practice in, it's very much that GALs or attorneys for your children are appointed by the court. That process can vary, I think, depending on the court that you're in. I know in Connecticut, where I practiced for so long, there was actually a training requirement we had to go through, which was rather extensive, I have to say. I did it, and I think every attorney should do it, whether you plan to act as a GAL or attorney for the children, because then you have a better understanding of the role. But many of our peers don't do it.
Well, and so much to say to that. So you're right. So you're appointed at the court's request, and the common theme universally, I think, is that you are the eyes and ears of the court. So you are there out on the front lines, coming back to the judge and reporting in various ways. So as a GAL, for example, in practice in Illinois, we would be doing a written report for the court I don't know that that's universal. I think very often as a GAL, even though I do written reports, the judge just says, Beth, what's going on? Tell me what's happening. It's much less formal, right?
Yeah.
And as a child representative, interestingly, you are acting as a lawyer. So you're an advocate. You are, as a GAL in Illinois, you might be called as a witness to testify. Whereas as a child representative, you're the advocate asking other witnesses questions. So I think that's an overview that I think should serve the listeners at this point. But what I think would really be helpful, no matter what the role is or the title of the person who's acting on your children's behalf, it's how do I talk to them, right, Susan? I feel like very few people get the importance of those meetings and how to present.
Well, I think that's really the drill down point in this entire episode. I think you're right, Beth, because for so many people, yes, there's confusion around the role. And I think it's important for people to understand. I think your distinction was really a great one. GALs, it's almost a more informal role because they are someone who's fact gathering and coming up with opinions and recommendations for the court, as opposed to the attorney for your children. An attorney for your children is a third attorney in your case, or in some cases, an eighth attorney, but right. And one other point just to make for people, at least in the 2 states where I've practiced, you can have both a GAL and an attorney for your children.
100%. Actually, I was thinking of that when I was talking about this 17-year-old girl who wants what she wants. So of course, the court's going to see through that. If I'm her advocate and I'm just simply arguing what she wants, the court wants to know what's in her best interest too. So they would appoint a GAL. That's why Illinois came up with this blended role. And gosh, even I've had cases where I'm the child's representative in a case where there's a GAL as well. So again, without going into the whole legal ramifications of each role, I think it's important for people to know that distinctions exist, and that I think in many jurisdictions, a GAL is not even a lawyer. I feel like mental health professionals in some jurisdictions are considered GALs, yes?
Yeah, in Connecticut, where I practiced for so long. Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, there may be reasons why you want a GAL who is a mental health professional. And that kind of goes to that core of, why do you get a GAL or attorney for minor children involved in your case? What cases have that sort of layered into? Most cases don't have them, right? So why would you have them?
I think that's a great point. It's the most humbling role I have, right? Somebody is giving the power to me. Obviously, when you're in litigation, you are giving over your power and your outcome, controlling your outcome to the court. The court then is giving up power for a bit to give this person, we'll say GAL, the power to go out on the front lines and learn as much as they can, come back and report and be the eyes and ears of the court. What's going on out there? What do the children say? What do the neighbors say? What do the coaches, the teachers, all the investigating that you do? Wait, I'm going to be recommending where this child rests their head every night. I'm going to be recommending who's going to be making major life decisions on health, education, religion, extracurriculars. You're going to cede your power as a parent to me. So very often as a GAL, my first goal is to bring them back. And interestingly, as a mediator, Susan, I say in that role, I act as a mediator with teeth. So now you have a ceded control, and I try to give it back to you and get both parents to the table, if at all possible, and give them power back with little tips and tricks on what my investigation held. And, if somebody feels all empowered that it's going to go their way, I may bring that down a couple notches, or vice versa. And again, no one knows their children best than the two people who created them, right? So I think usually I can talk sense into people and keep it from being a report to the court.
Yeah. And that's sort of your ability. And I think this is personal to you, Beth, as well, and why you're so good in this particular role and at everything you do. But, that you very much honor the role of the parents and realize that sometimes it's a case of parents who've kind of lost their way on parenting and think that, and we all run into these cases, right, where they think that, well, we'll just get a GAL. The GAL is going to see it my way. Right. And this is all going to, then they'll tell the judge that I'm right, he's wrong, or she's wrong, and it's all going to go my way. And, you and I both know that's rarely how it actually goes.
Rarely the case. Again, a good GAL doesn't go into it with an agenda or a preconceived notion of, a lot of times people will say, oh, she's mom friendly, dad friendly. He always goes with the dad, those sort of things. Your attorneys often in all jurisdictions may be able to limit the pool of preferred people to the court. But Susan, I'm guessing similarly, your experience is that the judge ultimately decides who it will be because you're his or her eyes and ears. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's, different states have different methods for appointing. I do know that in Connecticut and California, it's often actually when a case it's clear we're going to have custodial issues, and these are not going to be resolved at least easily or in due time. The parties will agree that a GAL or attorney is needed, and sometimes they will agree on who they might ask the court to appoint. I've seen the court say no, but more often if the two attorneys in the couple agree, the court will appoint that person.
Interestingly, just yesterday, I was on a team call where I had to remind the lawyers, go into this humbly with this judge, because as soon as you go in and say, here's what we're doing, that's when a judge again is going to say, no, I'm the judge, I decide, which goes back to the power I was talking about a GAL might have. Judges don't always follow the GAL's recommendation. I really want to make sure everybody knows that. But also kind of reality testing, more often than not they do. But remember, as a GAL, you're a witness. So under cross-examination, some of your recommendations could be diminished because the court may think that you did it, we're all human. So as a person who has long advocated for survivors of domestic violence, as an example, if I have a sense that there's a power imbalance and that there's something in here as it relates to an imbalance of power, I'm going to call that the way I see it. It may be that I saw it one way, it may not be. So an attorney may call me to testify and really try to trip me up on my impressions and my findings. You don't really know, because in domestic violence, we all know those are subtle. None of us are ever there. So all I know is what I hear, and I'm assessing truth just like a judge is. I'm trying to determine who I believe, and it doesn't mean that I always have it right. I do more often than not, though.
I believe that, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I think your peers in the industry, if they needed a GAL or an attorney for minor children, you're a popular choice, right? Because they know Beth knows this role. And I think what you're describing also, and I want people to understand this is hard work. It is hard to be the GAL and or the attorney for the children. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. You don't just, talk to the parents, get the lay of the land and make a recommendation. There's a lot of footwork that goes on with this.
There really is, again, if you do it well, and obviously a ton of emotion. Back to being humbled. If you care at all about the work you do, it can be very, very hard, because the children, no matter how strong and resilient they appear on the outside, they're suffering. If their parents are divorcing, they're feeling some level of pain. And it's the teenagers who always get me, because they do want to be so strong and act so tough. And I have made it my practice to stay in touch with these kiddos for life. So the stories I could tell you of the resilience of these kids and the difference that I think I've made. I have a mother who recently shared her son's journey of being who he is as a human, right? So back in the day when I first met him, you know, Dad was a big, tough police officer who could not conceive of having a child who was gay. Well, you know, here's a young boy who is trying to understand who he is, much less having his parents go through a divorce and not have the presence of each parent to accept him for who he was. Well, did that make Dad a bad guy? Maybe, you know, I wanted to encourage Dad to be who he is, but that's Dad. And Dad was, I'm not going to fix Dad or make Dad a good person. But Susan, I think the goal of this episode was how to prepare for these meetings.
Yeah.
So if Dad had had a lawyer who prepped him for, you know, maybe you don't think that it's okay for your son to be gay, but here's how you're going to present to the GAL so that the GAL will hear you and see you as somewhat open-minded to your son being whomever he needs to be, instead of this persona that, okay, I get in real life, that's who you are, but can you at least pretend for the hour meeting with me that, anyway, that's one example of the importance of preparing for these meetings, Susan. Here I have a law firm of several lawyers, and whenever there's an issue as it relates to parenting, they come to me to prepare the clients for meetings with GALs, custody evaluators. It's all kind of the same role-ish. How can you best present so that you are seen in the best light possible?
Yeah.
So if you'd like, I'll go through some of that stuff.
Well, I do think that that's actually really such an important aspect. And I know it's really one of your areas of specialty. And this is where, you know, not to throw some of our colleagues under the bus, but I've been involved in cases where I would say attorneys have not properly prepared their clients to work with the guardian or the attorney or both. And there's a great deal of prep, actually. It's like going to a deposition. You shouldn't go into a deposition cold without having, you know, pre-deposition meetings with your attorney. Same thing when it comes to a GAL. So what I think I would love for you to do is, what if you were the attorney for one of the parents and a GAL or attorney had been appointed for the children, what would you tell your clients?
So I always focus on the importance of stating facts. All too often, somebody will come in. So I'm looking at it through the lens of the GAL when I'm prepping the client and thinking of what not to do. When you're going into that meeting, using names or name calling or summarizing, you know, if I hear another minute, so-and-so is a narcissist,
Yeah.
as you know, Susan,
I was just thinking that.
this is the word that we're all using now. And having said that, you've done episodes on it. I've done episodes on it. It's definitely something that I would love to speak on with you another time. When you're going into that, those labels don't help, because again, if it's a buzzword, you're kind of losing credibility with me already, because I don't know what that means to you. I certainly don't know what it means. Break it down. What behaviors are you observing? And always back up your facts with dates and times. That adds to credibility. So I'm always telling people, you can't, if you were not one who journals, you can't possibly remember dates exactly, but you might remember it was the summer, and you might remember your kid looked like this. So you might say, in the summer of 2012, I remember X, Y, and Z happened, or something like that. That adds to your credibility. Well, in order to do that, to prepare for that meeting, you should spend, I think, hours, maybe days, preparing for that meeting. You should prepare an outline, and that outline should have all of your talking points. And then I like that outline to be backed up with a binder old school paper, tabs, all of it. Again, you don't know who your GAL is and how they like to think. So of course you may back it up with an electronic version, but whatever you do, have that data backing up your outline. If the theory of your case is, I'm gonna try to be as gender neutral as I can. So let's say mom is overprotective. Mom creates a bubble for the child that doesn't allow the child to go understand life, and that, you know, cocooning is causing the child to be much younger than she might be. If those are the facts of the case, back up stories with dates of what happened, you know, rather than dropping her at the door at ballet when she's 9 years old, mom walked her in every day. And then who's going to back that up? Well, maybe the ballet teacher. So then have in those notes, who's going to validate whatever your theory of your case is. If you've got the mom who's physically abusive, how are you going to prove that? You know, a kid may never acknowledge it, which goes back to your point of training.
Right.
We learn in training kind of 101 is you don't ask children point blank, obviously, but all too often it's not as obvious.
I was just going to say, yeah.
You don't say, who do you want to live with? Well, I mean, that's 101. But even if you want to try to understand the facts of a case and, you know, what really happened with mom, you know, you're just talking around issues. I think a good GAL, again, remember, we're lawyers. We're not trained mental health professionals. There are very few of us who have both roles, but most lawyers don't really know how to do this in a soft, gentle way. We're trained to get the facts and cross-examine, and exactly. We bring that down 100 notches. We meet with kids in a park, as an example, or in their bedroom versus sitting in an office with their feet dangling across from me, right? So how are you best going to get to the facts from that child? The worst is when you meet with that child and they were so clearly prepped